about that. But Payton Soicher, Chief Rankings Officer, with us here. RankingsRightNow.com. We've been doing some videos over on the Triple Option channel all week long, last week and this week, and we'll continue on throughout the season with Payton as we diagnose the rankings. Payton, for people who haven't seen those, what was your biggest surprise? And I know the conundrum going into the week was Ole Miss and Notre Dame, seeing as Notre Dame has one loss, Ole Miss has two.
Yeah, the big ones were obviously that Miami and Georgia lost. And the biggest question that I had was our algorithm predicted that they would be 11 and 12 with the same ranking. Georgia has 11, Miami at 12. Miami dropped to 9 and Georgia dropped to 11. And they dropped to 12. And I don't understand that at all. If you're going to go off of strength of schedule, or Georgia, that's Georgia's second loss, that's only Miami's first loss, then why wasn't Miami ahead of Georgia in the first place? Like, I don't understand why Miami, who lost to unranked Georgia Tech, and Georgia, who lost to a highly ranked Ole Miss, why does Georgia get punished harder in the rankings than a Miami team? That made no sense to me whatsoever. And then you have a little bit in the middle with Indiana, BYU, and Tennessee. They're like flip-flopping. Same thing. Tennessee starts ahead of them. Tennessee has a good win. Indiana, BYU have okay wins. All of a sudden, Tennessee's on the other side of that. Not 100% sure where that is. And Tennessee had to play against Mississippi State. So our algorithm had a little bit of bad predictions in that middle ground, and I can understand why. Usually, as like a data scientist or a mathematician, you try and evaluate why your errors are so bad. And in this case, I didn't really fault the algorithm that bad on it. The algorithm's predictions completely aligned with what I would have anticipated. So it seems like the playoff committee is a little bit more interested in closer games than big blowouts. For example, Tennessee beat Mississippi State by like 23-24, I want to say. Not enough. You need to blow them out. And I think we saw that a couple years ago with Nick Saban. Nick Saban used to run up the score on a lot of teams. And I think he kind of said, well, you need to put up 60 points in order for the selection committee to think that you're a legitimate team. If you only win by 20, they might say, oh, well, BYU against Utah, that was a close game. And so BYU deserves a little bit more credit for muscling that one out versus playing a really, really low in the bottom of the rankings team like Mississippi State. You gotta blow them out. So those were the things that kind of surprised me after what I saw on Tuesday.
Yeah, you looking at your projected rankings right now, the top 5 is static for you. And then if Georgia wins as predicted, they have a big jump and kind of leap over BYU, who'll drop in spite of a win because Georgia's Georgia. And I would assume that would be the controversy of the week, and that you would have a 10-0 team with a 2-loss team right there.
Well, and that depends, and we can get into this in a little bit with the what-if simulation tool, but as of right now, BYU is a 2-point favorite to Kansas at home. Name any other team in the top 15, maybe outside Boise State, that would be only a 2-point favorite against Kansas at home.
Probably nobody.
I can't think of anyone off the top of my head.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why they're dropping a spot, right? Georgia is flying up there in those rankings. Say, hey, if you're going to beat the number 7 ranked team, you should jump up a lot, right? That's a highly ranked team. We saw that with Ole Miss last weekend, right? They moved up to 11 from 16. You're going to jump up a good amount of spots there. But BYU is taking that step back because A, that's where Georgia's planned to be in the next rankings. And B, according to this projection, this single projection, BYU is only going to have a 2-point win against Kansas. And I think a lot of people, if we saw BYU only win by 2 against Kansas, we wouldn't be saying, I mean, we kind of just talked about it with Utah, but we wouldn't be saying, man, what a great win for BYU. Everyone's been smoking Kansas this year, right? They've been hot the last couple of games, but they have really underwhelmed everyone from where their expectations were based off of last year. Coming into this year, they were highly ranked in the AP poll to start the year. So that's the main reason why BYU's taken that step back.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. All right, let's get into some what ifs.
Let's do it.
Now, I just ran this one myself, but we're not sharing my screen. So I'm very curious on Arizona State, who, should they win the game, and I put in a score of 31-27 for Arizona State and Kansas State, will they get into the rankings?
Okay, great. So we have Arizona State and Kansas State, and I heard you guys talking about this earlier on the show. What did you put in for the score?
I put in 31-27.
31-27. So we're going to do 31-27. By the way, this is rankingsrightnow.com. This is the what if simulation tool, free for anyone who has a login on the website. So we go in here, we're updating the score of 31-27 for Arizona State. We're going to go ahead and run the simulation, and immediately we get back what the projected rankings are going to be for this game. Now, Arizona State creeping into the top 25 right there. And then you have Kansas State dropping all the way down to 25. So that puts them both in competition if Arizona State can pull that one out. And we can even extend out the top 25 to the all teams, so you can get a little bit of idea of 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30. So this is where we're kind of sitting right here with the bottom of that bucket. But yes, according to the algorithm, if ASU can pull this one out, they will be a ranked team going into Tuesday's poll release.
All right, let's flip Georgia and Tennessee, and let's give that game a score of 24-20.
Great. So let's do 24-20. 20. I'm assuming Tennessee 24.
Tennessee
right?
24-20. Yes.
Yep, 20. Okay, great. Run the simulation. And then just as a reminder, you can always look at your altered games right here to make sure you're what exactly you've changed for this simulation. So Tennessee moves up ahead of BYU. So, and Indiana. And if you remember the first rankings release, that's where Tennessee was. Tennessee was already ahead of Indiana and BYU. After last weekend, Indiana fell below them. And now, according to this, if they can beat Georgia, they would stay ahead of Indiana and BYU. I think once again, that also maybe not as controversial, right? To have a Tennessee team beat a Georgia team that's been highly ranked the entire year, ahead of undefeated Indiana, ahead of undefeated BYU. But I think in this scenario, that makes a lot of sense for them to stay 5. I think the real college football fans would still be yelling that Penn State's a little bit too high there, but that's where we're sitting at right now.
All right, let's flip Kansas and BYU.
Okay, great. So this one will have a lot more of an impact. So here we go. What do we think? Oh, just flip it?
Just flip it.
Perfect.
Yeah, 30-28.
Easy. 30-28. Run the simulation. BYU dropping all the way to 13, which makes things really interesting. You also have Kansas State right on their heels. So yeah, that's a lot of Big 12 drama right there. Kansas does not creep into the top 25 with this win. They've had way too many losses.
Well, I mean, they'd be 4-6. So
there's just no way. So I bet you they would make up a lot of ground if we really wanted to go ahead and find them. But I think that really BYU has a lot of ground lost there. Speaking of Big 12, CU is projected to drop down 2 spots as well. And this really surprised me. So the reason for this, and just very similarly to what we just talked about with Tennessee, right? Tennessee really beat Mississippi State bad, but not enough. So here we are, and we're looking at CU playing Utah this week. And Utah, the projected score of that game, let's just go ahead and go back to the home team homepage real quick. According to Vegas, right now, CU is a 12-point favorite at home against Utah. That drops them down 2 spots in the rankings. I would actually be very surprised by this, but this is what the algorithm is showing right now. The reason being is that South Carolina plays Missouri. Missouri is a ranked team. They're predicted to have a 14-point win over Mizzou. And you have Clemson with a 3-spot jump as well. Clemson is playing Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, has been hot all year until the last 2 weeks, right? They've completely fallen apart. So Pittsburgh is still deemed as a highly ranked team, just not in the top 25. They're probably a top 50. So if Clemson can go on the road and have a 12-point win against Pitt, South Carolina can beat a ranked team by 14 at home. What is CU at home with only a 12-point win against Utah that has done nothing right outside of the last 5 weeks and almost squeaked one out against BYU? I think this CU win against Utah would have meant so much more if Utah had just beaten BYU. And we've talked about this throughout the year. It is who you beat and when you beat them. If CU plays Utah much earlier in the year and has a 12-point win, I think they are already valued much higher than going into this game right now and saying that's not a real Utah team. You're going to have to put up way more than 12 to really get our attention and say that these 2 wins right next door to you are not nearly as impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you see anything else? Do you see upsets that could happen that we're not talking about right now? There's not a lot of games that are in that realm this week. Now, that means crazy things could happen, but I think we've kind of covered all of the upset possibilities, right?
Yeah, I think the only other sleeper alert I can really think of is Arkansas, just because they've done it before. And they haven't had a great year, but they're competitive. So a noon kickoff game, that might be a little bit of a sleeper for a lot of people. I think a lot of people just might overlook this. It's hard. I mean, these are 18 to 22-year-olds that we're talking about right now, unless you're Cam Rising and you're like 30. But if you have something, if this is a night game, you can hype up these kids and get them really excited to play. That one might be a little bit of a lull, right? Purdue's not going to compete with Penn State. Wisconsin will hang in with Oregon, but I think Oregon has too much firepower. I don't think Ohio State's going to have any problem with Northwestern, right? I doubt Alabama's going to have a little bit of a problem with Mercer, but that would be the biggest story out of the entire year if that happened. I don't think that's going to happen. But other than that, like Virginia had a nice win against Pitt last weekend. I don't really see, like you said, this is a lull of a week, if you ask me, but we've had like 2 or 3 weeks this year where it's like, this is going to be a lull. And it was just chaos from start to finish, right? So there's so many noon games that I'm seeing that I'm like, I wonder if that actually might lead to something a little bit crazy just because we're dealing with a bunch of college kids.
Okay. We just got a $20 super chat that says, and it's in burnt orange too. That says, can you say something nice about Texas? So here's what I will say nice about Texas. They are very, very, very good. They are extremely good. And I do think that they've gotten a raw deal on the perception of their schedule this year, because it is not their fault that Michigan, Mississippi State, Florida, and
Michigan,
and Oklahoma are all
right.
Meh. That's not their fault. That's not their fault. Now, shouldn't have gotten worked for a half at Georgia, but even still, you're still number 3. That all being said, those are the nice things. Can we run a simulation where if Arkansas pulls this off, I want to see where Texas plummets to?
That being said,
if something bad happens to them, not saying I'm wishing this, Choatiken, that I'm not saying I hope for it to happen. But there was my nice thing.
Texas down to 12 if they lose this one to Arkansas.
Yeah.
Which seems about right. But once again, right? I was surprised, right? You had Miami dropping down to 9. I don't understand why. It's not like Miami has played flawless football the entire year and then stumbled up at the very end against Georgia Tech, right? Why would you only fault Miami 5 spots, but Georgia gets put right at the very edge of elimination? And as a matter of fact, they would have been eliminated. They would have been the first team out of the college football playoff this weekend, because Boise was sitting at 13 and they would have been the group of 5 that would have gotten in. So I just don't understand it. So, I hope they're not evaluating based off of who you've lost to this year versus who you've beaten, right? It is a very strange scenario to say Georgia absolutely stomped all over Texas, and Texas is 9 spots higher in the rankings than Georgia. That's a very strange situation. And that's not from a week 1 or week 2 win. That's from like a 2 weeks ago win. So I really do see that Texas is holding steady in that spot. As we saw on the current rankings, they're right up there still in those top 3 spots. But, they're on very wobbly ground, where I would say Ohio State and Oregon, they can lose a game and people are not going to overreact. I'm very interested going into next weekend on that Ohio State-Indiana game, on what the implications of that loss would be, because I don't think that you're going to send Ohio State all the way down to 10 or 11 or 12. They might just flip-flop with Indiana, in my opinion. So it'll be very interesting to see where that lands.
Do you think, looking ahead, this is something for us to think about as we go into next week? And I'm sure we will do a video on this, and then we'll do it next week as well. But do you think that the Ohio State-Indiana game will be weighted the same way no matter who loses? Because they're right there next to each other in the rankings, essentially.
Similar, very, very similarly, right?
Yeah.
That's how the algorithm works. It does very focus on who you're playing and where they align in the rankings. So if you have 2 teams that are right next to each other, the algorithm is very based off of what we learned, right? And I think that's how the AP votes. That's how the selection committee votes. It's very much, what did we learn about you? When Notre Dame plays Florida State and wins by 50, they don't move up that high in the rankings. Why? Because we didn't learn anything. You haven't proven yourself. When you have 2 big teams clash against one another, right? As long as one of them doesn't get completely blown out, you have something to say, okay, we've learned something. They're competitive, they're tough, they're strong. Now, if you get blown out, if you're the 2 ranked team, and let's say Indiana's 5 or 6 at the end of this weekend, if Indiana blows out Ohio State can take a big fall, because you've just proved that you're not competitive with the number 5. But if you're saying you are competitive with number 5, then maybe you just flip-flop with them and say, well, maybe they're 2 and you're 5. But there's nothing else really to it more than that. So I'm very curious on where that's going to be the main talking point about all of college football on next weekend. So that one I'm most interested in. This one, there's just not enough big games that are happening outside of Georgia and Tennessee. But like we've said, we've done that a couple of times this year, and then by next week, and we're like, oh my gosh, that was not what we expected.
Yeah. Okay, Payton, before we wrap up, I got a $20 super chat to say something nice about Texas. Not to compare them, just throw out, like you or Garrett, throw out just anybody that or anything that would be considered unlikable to a point. Like, I'm not gonna say anything about Hitler, but like to a point, like, and I'll try to say something just for fun here. What can I say nice about someone or something?
Tim Tebow.
You know what? Let me tell you, Tim Tebow was the best at 1-yard touchdowns of anybody ever. Like, you could not stop him for 1 yard.
Better than Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, look.
We're expanding out the horizon there in football, but
yes, better, like Jalen Hurts. Look, there's no Jalen Hurts without Tim Tebow.
Okay.
Jalen Hurts watched Tim Tebow and said, okay, here's how I can make my body style work for this. Yeah. So there you go. I said a nice thing about Tim Tebow. I can do it. And for $20, I will say a nice thing about anyone. So, or almost anyone. Don't want to say nice things about Dr. Pepper. Old Barncat, if you don't like it, I haven't had one in 6 years because I actually had one recently because I don't really drink. I'm more of a seltzer guy now. And go ahead and make fun of me all you want, chat room. But
I will.
I love Dr. Pepper. I miss Dr. Pepper. I used to, honestly, if you showered me in it, I would be fine. Especially the Dr. Pepper cherry. Really loved that. I thought that was quite good. Okay, yeah. So that's not. I was saying say something like candy corn. Like candy corn has done a really good job of marketing really crappy candy to people who seem to like it. I don't understand. They've figured it out. I don't know. That's
yeah.
Good
I think you've officially crossed the line with the candy corn. Nice things about candy corn. But yeah.
Yeah, I can do that. That's going to be a thing from now on. I'll see how many please say nice things about something I can get. And maybe the going rate doesn't have to be $20, but it could be lower. I will say nice things about something if you pay me. Absolutely. Payton Soicher, rankingsrightnow.com. I burned through all my my freebie rankings this week just in the few minutes before the segment. So it is so fun. It is so fun to do. And if you're sitting around thinking about it, what happens here, it is super easy to use too. Sometimes these websites come along and say this, and Payton, let me tell you, you guys have made it so simple to use. It's not one of those things that's overwrought when you get to it. So
worked really hard. This is the first year too. We're learning from everyone's feedback, what they like, what we don't like, what's important to us, what's not important to us. We have more and more people playing in the College Rankem Challenge each week, and then we announce the winner every week in our newsletter. It's been a ton of fun. I've been having a blast with it. So yeah. Thank you for the nice feedback. Thank you for saying something nice. I appreciate it.
There we go. It took nothing. It just I did that one on my own. That was a true thing. Although now, after I said all those other things, people may not believe me. I get it. I might have been the boy who cried wolf. But no, it truly is genuine. Payton and I will talk to you this weekend. We'll figure out next week. And check out Payton Monday through Thursday. We're doing segments we put on the Triple Option channel. If we have time, we sneak them into the back end of the show. Wednesday and Thursday, we didn't because I was too verbose, but they're really good stuff. He kind of breaks down little different issues, reactions to the poll, things to look for, all of that. He does. You essentially Tuesdays we've kind of made the what if simulation, kind of a day, or Tuesday and Thursday to that. Monday is what to look for. Wednesday is okay, here's where it is. The what I would recommend people specifically this week to go look at your video. That's what is a ranking, because you really do propose a fundamental question.
I work on these things all day, and I struggle to come up with a definition, right? What really is a ranking? Is it this team would beat this team? Because I don't think anyone would agree with where the top, if you ordered those, one would beat two, that would beat three, that would beat four. I don't see that being the case. So what is it? I don't know. That's what makes this so much fun, and trying to establish an algorithm that will find the patterns on how people vote. But I don't know truly what the value of a ranking is, especially in college football.
Also, on that video, you get to see one of Peyton's kids, a toddler, at a full dead sprint in the background.
It's nothing but madness here.
In frame, boom, just a dart. And here with me, I don't know you, if for me, I'd be let's get this kid in the backyard. We're going to get their 40 up.
Oh, yeah.
To about, because it was some good, it was some good toddler speed, some good strides.
Yeah, the only word is potential. There's just nothing but potential in those legs.
That's right. Payton Soicher, rankingsrightnow.com. You'll see him more and more throughout the Triple Option and, of course, 365 Sports. Payton, have a great weekend. I'll talk to you, buddy.
You too. Thanks, guys.
There you go. Payton Soicher, Rankings Right Now. Coming up next, Evan Abrams.